Welcome to Oh Brother, Not Another podcast. We are an official Apple podcast and we can be found on many other platforms. And my name is Miggs Burrows.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, wake up.
Who am I? And I'm Trace Burrows. I better wake up. Okay. And today we're excited to have Colin Blunstone on. He's the lead singer, songwriter of the Zombies, one of the big British invasion groups from the late 60s. And my band, you know, we did zombie songs like when I was in like high school, and even I think at high school we started doing them. So it's great to have you on the show. Are you touring right now, or are you about to tour? What's happening with that?
No, we've because of the pandemic, we've literally been at home for 2 years, and I think 2 or 3 tours have been either cancelled or rescheduled for next year. But we are due to start. We're coming to the States. We're actually coming at the end of March, and we're going to be there for 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be our first proper tour in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. I've missed that. I've missed being on the road.
And what's the lineup? What would be the current lineup? Is Rod Argent still in the group?
Oh yes, Rod Argent's a keyboard player. Steve Rodford is on drums. Tom Toomey is on guitar, and Soren Koch is on bass. He's a Danish guy who in the last couple of years has taken over from Jim Rodford, who sadly died in an accident. So it's a comparatively new lineup with regard to Soren taking over on the bass, but otherwise the lineup's been together for 10 or 12 years as it is. And it is a really, really strong lineup. It's a great band.
That's great that you've been able to keep those musicians together for that long time.
Yeah, as well as I can't remember where I saw you in London, but I also saw you in Connecticut here in the States about maybe 8 years ago. You wouldn't remember the venue, I'm sure, but it was a great. And actually, we did a meet and greet, so I think I actually met you. We lined up and got to shake hands with the band. But I have a question about. I was, got the iPhone when it came out about 12 years ago, and from day one, my ringtone was Time of the Season. And I'm wondering, that I must be one of millions that have Time of the Season as their ringtone. But do you get paid for ringtones? Does the group get paid for?
I think perhaps the writer does. I'm not sure if the band does. I'd like to think so. I certainly would like to think so. Yeah,
I'd like to too, because every time I hear, and people, what's great about it is my phone will go off in my pocket, and I'm at some event or something, and people will from 20 feet away go, "That's Time of the Season." I mean, it's such an incredibly iconic song.
Yeah. It's an interesting song to me because it was the last song that the original Zombies recorded in Studio 3 in Abbey Road. I can remember it vividly. But the song itself was a big hit all around the world, except in the UK, which is, of course, where we live.
Yeah.
It was never a hit. Never a hit in this country, but it was worldwide. It was the Zombies' biggest hit, and it was #1 in Cashbox and 2 or 3 in Billboard, I think. But for some reason, it's been released 3 or 4 times in the UK, but it was never a hit. But people here know it because it's been in lots of commercials and it's been in lots of films, so they're familiar with it. I think a lot of British people think that it was a hit, but it actually wasn't. It's one of those strange things with songs,
And you were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019, right? That must have been exciting.
And you sang, in time. I saw the video.
Right.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I think there were 6 other acts: The Cure, Roxy Music, Janet Jackson, Def Leppard, Radiohead, and Stevie Nicks. And the ceremony was at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn in front of 17,000 people, and it was televised as well. So, I mean, it was an evening I'll never forget. It was absolutely incredible. And in some ways, it was a little unexpected because the band originally finished in 1967. And it was kind of by chance that Rod and I got back together in 1999. What actually happened was that I was touring as a solo artist, and I had a keyboard player who was lovely bloke, great player, but totally unreliable. And if anybody asked him to play anywhere, like a coffee bar or a vicar's tea party, and play some of his songs, this keyboard player would disappear, and I would be left with no keyboard player.
Oh my God.
And the last night he did this, I was playing quite a big place in London with a keyboard player who didn't know me. I just met him just before we went on stage. He didn't know me. He didn't know any of the songs. I mean, really, I could have saved him the bus fare because he didn't know what we were doing. I thought, I'm going to have a heart attack if I have any more gigs like that, because he had no idea what he was doing and I had no idea what he was doing. And so I phoned up Rod Argent and I said, and Rod was a really successful producer at this point. And so he was living in the studio, that's where his work was. And I said to him, look, I've got 6 dates left on this tour. Any chance you could come out and help me out on these 6 dates? And he said, yeah. I'd love to play the 6 dates, but I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to go back on the road. 6 dates, fine. So that was 1999. And here we are in 2022. And he really enjoyed it so much that we just kept going. So so much in the Zombies history is chance. And that's one of the things that if this keyboard player hadn't kept disappearing, perhaps Rod and I would have never got back together again. And we just built it up, for nothing. We were playing in little rooms at the back of pubs and just word of mouth and continually touring. We've built it up to, we're playing quite serious venues now. And the icing on the cake was, as we were just talking about, we just got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is just incredible.
Well, it's a great video of you doing Time of the Season, the group, and it's so much hard. I mean, the way you sing, I mean, you can just tell it's such a passionate performance. But do you get to rehearse very much for the Hall of Fame?
I think, we played it through in the morning from memory, I don't think you exactly rehearse. I think I think to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you've had to have been making records for something like 25 years. There's a rule, it's not for new bands. This is a band for more classic bands. So I think they kind of accept that the songs. You're not going to rehearse. But we got sounds. We played it a couple of times. But of course, they want the original lineup. Now, Hugh Grundy, who plays drums in the original band, and Chris White, who plays bass, they haven't played professionally, except when they play with us when we do Odyssey and Oracle with the original band. But they haven't toured professionally really since 1967. So they did incredibly well to come out on stage and play in a fairly pressured environment like that when they haven't toured regularly over the years. They were fantastic.
What do they do? What have they been doing all these years?
Well, Chris is a writer. I mean, he's a producer and a writer, but he's written many, many great songs. And of course, he wrote Hold Your Head Up for Argent, which was Rod Argent's next band. Chris White wrote that song. And he's written many, many songs. Hugh, I lost track with Hugh a little bit until I know he had a really lovely pub. I went there, which was about 50 miles away from where I live. I had a couple of very nice evenings up there. But he now lives just off Spain in one of the Balearic Islands, Minorca. Hugh still plays in a local band, but he's retired now.
When Miggs went to England, was the late 60s, right, Miggs? And I went in 1971 or 70. And of course, the Marquee Club was really a huge place for bands to start out. Did the Zombies get to play there?
Well, strangely enough, the Zombies didn't play in London very much.
Oh,
From memory, I'm pretty sure we only played 2 dates in London ever. And I can't really explain why. I think when we started, we we had a hit record straight away. So instead of having that kind of baptism of fire of playing the London clubs,
yeah.
we were straight away on package tours. You know, we were shipped off to do a tour with the Searchers and the Isley Brothers and Dionne Warwick. Almost immediately, we became a professional band. I think it was a real loss for us that we didn't play those clubs like Eel Pie Island, Kluk's Clique, and the Marquee, and many others. Later on, as a solo artist, after 71, I was a solo artist, and I certainly played the Marquee as a solo artist many times. I loved it. It was a fantastic place to play. But
Yeah.
no, the Zombies very rarely played London. It was strange.
And I've heard other British rock guys from that time period talk about the Bag of Nails Club. I guess they had music there. I don't know if that was pre-Marquee. Yeah.
The Bag of Nails Club, I remember late 60s and into the 70s, I think. I used to go there to have a drink. I never played there.
Yeah.
And we used to go to the Cromwellian Club as well, which was that same sort of era. And we were made members. I don't know how we got a membership for the Bag of Nails. I've no idea, but we were made members of the Cromwellian Club because we auditioned for Otto Preminger's film, Bunny Lake is Missing.
Oh, sure.
Starring Laurence Olivier and Carol Lindley. And we had 3 songs in that film. So there was a basement at the Cromwellian Club, and we auditioned for Otto Preminger and his entourage.
Oh.
And he was an interesting character, fairly tough,
imposing,
character.
right.
And he liked
for it. Yeah.
Yeah. He liked to shout and stuff. It didn't really work with us because we could take it or leave it, you know. And it did get a bit tense at times, but actually we just ignored him, and he quietened down after that. But for the people around him, he was very demanding. And I noticed that he got his sort of secretary. She was crying. He was shouting at her so much. It was. I mean, I'm not saying this as a joke. It really wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
And she was crying when Otto was shouting at her, and we just ignored him really.
So I don't know where I saw this on Wikipedia that says that Zombies made like 25 appearances or something like that on TV and film. Is that like just the music, or were you actually playing the Zombies in a, as yourselves in a movie, or how did that work?
No. But we did a lot of TVs. Certainly in the 60s, there were. The main ones here, I'm trying to remember what they're called. Top of the Pops was a huge show over here once a week. Ready, Steady, Go, we played that many, many times. And Thank Your Lucky Stars, I think, was another one. So the Zombies did a lot of TV in the UK. But no, we never, I don't think any of us would claim to be actors.
Yeah, Shindig here.
It's an interesting thought.
We used to watch.
We did Shindig, yeah. And
Hullabaloo, yeah.
And
Hullabaloo. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, like the
the first ever Hullabaloo.
Oh, well. So I'm curious. Is the word the phrase British invasion? Is that? Are you okay with that phrase? I just started to think about it. It's like sounds like, you're invading, you're intruding. It could have negative connotations. I mean, do you like being talked about as one of the British invasion groups? You're a British group, who made it big in the U.S.
No, I mean, I don't mind at all. I know it was
You're trying to make it sound like the Revolutionary War or something.
Yeah.
Right.
You have muskets
it was
when you came
a
over.
musical and social thing. So I don't mind.
You don't mind.
I don't mind that at all. I mean, in some ways, I'm really proud to have been involved in something like that. When you look at who you're being thought of with, bands like the Beatles and the Stones, the Kinks and the Who.
Right.
And if you're included in a list of bands like that, I think it's a real honor.
Sure.
It's amazing how, I read a little bit how the name came about, but, nowadays, zombies is such a ubiquitous term because of the TV shows and movies. And so, you're on the tip of everyone's tongue anyway, and more familiar. But when you were named the Zombies way back in the early 60s, that was who ever heard of a zombie then? Who?
Absolutely. Well, the name really, I think, came out of desperation because it's very important that a band has a name. And it seems in some ways a little bit trivial, but you have to have a name. And for about a week or 10 days, we were the Mustangs, and we realized there were thousands of bands with the name the Mustangs. And then and this was my idea, it's really awful. I got it from a film, a Robert Mitchum film, The Sundowners.
Oh.
And that only lasted days. It only lasted days. And that was my idea. So I plead guilty. And then our original bass player, who was only in the band for a short time, he came up with the idea of the Zombies. And I think everyone really liked it in the band. And it was memorable and snappy, but I had no idea what a zombie was. I'm not even sure if I know what a zombie is now, really. And I didn't particularly like it, but it just stuck. And, you get used to it after a while. And it doesn't really mean anything. It just means us.
It would mean something different.
Our band's called the Zombies.
Right. Today it would mean something different because people would think, oh, you're trying to be Living Dead. Yeah.
I like to think that we're trendsetters, you see, because before us there was no zombie culture. And so we introduced zombie culture to the world.
Yeah, I think you did.
Well, I like to think it may not be true.
So I have a trivial question about it. It's just I'm always fascinated by in Time of the Season. There's that breath, the dun dun dun, dun dun dun. Was that spontaneous? Did somebody write it? Say we're gonna all take a breath now. We're all gonna make that breathy sound. Do you remember how that came about?
Well, I can remember it really clearly. We were sitting listening to the track. No, there was no idea of having a dun, dun, dun. That hadn't been mentioned. And Rod Argent was sitting there and he said, I can hear some sort of percussive noises here, maybe a hand clap and a breath. And I think it was the engineer said, well, he was a guy called Peter Vince. He was a fantastic engineer. And he said, well, go in and do it, And so Rod was one take. And incidentally, we were recording on a very small budget. So a lot of things on that album were one take. We had to record very quickly. And so Rod just went out there and boom, boom, boom.
Was it hit? So that's him doing it or you? Who did the breath?
No, it's him. It's him.
Oh, okay.
I don't like to admit that, but it was Rod, yeah.
So back then, like how many tracks did the recording studios have? Like when you recorded that song?
Well, we were recording in Abbey Road in Studio 3, cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
I think actually they'd managed. See, we went into the studio just after the Beatles, days after the Beatles had finished Sgt. Pepper. And in England, they only had 4-track machines, but the Beach Boys had just been recording on an 8-track machine. And Beatles had just said to the guys in the boffins at Abbey Road, we want an 8-track machine. And they managed to literally put 2 4-track machines together. But in doing that, they lost 1 track. So we really were recording on 7 tracks. And we thought, this is incredible. We've got 7 tracks. I mean, compared to what happens nowadays, it's laughable, but it seemed like a real step up to us to be recording.
It's funny. I remember when Boston, the band came around, they boasted about, they're the ones who listen, we got like 120 tracks or whatever it was. It was a massive electronical board. And, it doesn't, the music sounds, doesn't really improve the form of the music by having so many more tracks. I always thought that was like overkill. I can see the way tracks would be.
It can be, and one of the real problems is it gives you so many choices, so it can really slow things down, because I don't want to go back to 4 tracks. I don't think, but that's the other. Like She's Not There was recorded on 4 tracks, and to a large extent, it was all done live pretty much. I think we put the vocals on afterwards. I did the lead vocal, and Rod and Chris did backing vocals at the same time after they'd done the backing track. But to a large extent, it was live. When you've got all these tracks, it gives you so many choices. It can make it torturously slow recording, because nobody can make up their minds what they want to do. So that's the downside of having so many tracks. But I mean, there's a middle path. You don't need 120 tracks really. You can.
There's something to be said, like, you go in there and you're playing, it's almost like playing live. Like I forget how I got into some recording studio. I was a drummer, and I was probably trying to audition with some band. But I remember sitting at the record plant for about 6 hours while this singer was trying to reach a note. It sounded perfect to me, to my ears. And then but he did over and over for hours. And they'd start doing cocaine, and then some guys, Alice Cooper came in, they started doing cocaine again, but they're just listening to this guy trying to reach this note, which again, to my ears was perfect the first time. But to them, it was like, more. It was like insane. I thought the guy was going to lose his voice.
Well, obviously it can happen. We've gone to exactly the opposite extreme with the Zombies. Our last album was called Still Got That Hunger, and we recorded it live pretty much. The backing tracks and the lead vocal were all live, one take. The solos were live, one take, but we overdubbed the backing vocals. That was the only thing that we overdubbed. And we've just finished in the last 2 days, we've finished a new album, and to a large extent, I think that was exactly the same. We recorded live, and including the vocals. Well, there's an energy that you get when you record live that's not there if you're recording separately. And a lot of albums nowadays are recorded separately. Maybe even people do their performance in their home studio, and they send it in digitally to the place where it's the whole project's being put together. But we prefer to all get in to the studio together. And I think it really does add something.
Yeah, I prefer energy over perfection any day. I mean, if you can piece a song together phrase by phrase, and it's just mechanical.
The essence of rock and roll is the energy.
Yeah, that's the essence of it. Yeah,
the essence is the energy and the stuff. So
I find it interesting in your history. The Beatles apparently auditioned for Decca and were turned down, and you were accepted by Decca Records, right? That was not your label, your first label.
God, when you put it like that, that's a bit strange. That's true. I mean, but in a way, although we didn't literally record for Decca, so we were quite lucky. We recorded for an independent production company who had a deal with Decca.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't actually audition for Decca. And it also meant that the ownership of the masters reverted to us after a period of time. So we were really fortunate because a lot of bands in the 60s really never saw any royalties in the 60s and haven't seen any royalties since. But for us, it's been almost the opposite, really. We did okay in the 60s from records, but because the songs are in so many films and commercials, we're still earning royalties 50 and 60 years later. So it's totally unexpected, but it's been a wonderful surprise.
Yeah. And look at all the books you've been able to buy with all that money. That's your personal library back there?
I know. This house is this is only one room, and there's another wall there with books as well. And there's a room next door that's full of books. And we're very avid readers in this house. It's insane. Sometimes I can't get into my bed because there are just so many books around the bed. Wow. So yeah, we read a lot.
When you say we, what's your family anyone say?
Oh yeah, I married my wife's Susie. She's in the next room, and we have a daughter called Rosie, who is actually a doctor, and she's a qualified doctor, and she's chosen to become a psychiatrist, and so she's on that path at the moment.
Wow,
So we're very proud of her.
absolutely.
Though she doesn't think we are, but we are.
Of course, yeah. Well,
If she ever sees this.
no, that's you're on the record as saying that's.
Yeah.
And we should. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thanks.
Well, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that Odyssey and Oracle was chosen by Rolling Stone as one of the 500 greatest albums ever recorded.
It was.
It's a big honor.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's fantastic that it was recognized by Rolling Stone, because at the time it wasn't really noticed by the public. I mean, that's one of the main reasons that the band finished in 1967, because Odyssey and Oracle didn't get the reaction we were hoping for. But just by word of mouth over the years, it's become, a very well-known album. It's quite an extraordinary story, really, without having it charted for 1 week, I think, at 98 in the Billboard chart. So it's really hasn't been a chart album.
Do you blame it on the record company for not putting enough promotion behind it, or do you think it was just like didn't have its time?
We're ahead of its time, yeah.
It might be ahead of its time, but also there was no band at that time to promote it, which I think puts it at a big disadvantage. The band finished in 67, and Time of the Season was a hit. I can't remember, but 68, 69, the band was long gone by then. And so we weren't there to promote the album.
That's probably a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
But I think you played it on the tour that I saw you on in United States. You did an Odyssey and Oracle tour, didn't you?
Yeah, we've done 2 or 3, I think, actually. And even on one of our last tours of the States, we toured with Brian Wilson. And we did Odyssey and Oracle. I think he did Smile, the album Smile. I really wanted him to do Pet Sounds, just because I've sort of thought of those songs, those albums coming out roughly the same time, but he thought they'd done Pet Sounds too much and he wanted to do something else. But it was great touring with Brian Wilson, a real experience, wonderful.
Yeah.
What were you go ahead. You want to? We're almost got a few minutes left. Trace should ask your.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wondered because you started so young. I mean, you were 16, I think, when you started, with the other guys and ended up being the Zombies. But what were you listening to as a kid then? Was it American imports? People always talk about, hearing music coming over. People like this. Well, in Liverpool, they'd come over on the boats, and the sailors would bring records from the United States, and that kind of thing.
Like Elvis and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the reason I wanted to be in a band, the reason I wanted to have a guitar, was American music. And my early influences probably would have been Elvis, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of them as the greats of rock and roll. And then later on, it would be Buddy Holly, Ricky Nelson, and
the Everly Brothers.
Everly Brothers, that's what I was trying to think of. And they were all American artists that I think we were listening to. And honestly, sometimes when I'm on stage, especially back in the 60s, I used to feel quite guilty when people are, applauding us. And I wanted to say, listen, we're playing your music. I don't want you to think we've stolen it. We're fans, We're real fans of American music, and we play it because we love it. And I'd always want people to know that we're not trying to make out that music is ours. It's American music. And it comes from the blues and the rhythm and blues that led to rock and roll.
Right, yeah. What was it? Muddy Waters said the blues had a baby, and it was called rock and roll.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
It's true.
but you had, what was it, skiffle music? What was in, sort of indigenous to Britain? I mean, you had your own.
We did. I mean, it's, I'm not quite sure what we had really. I think we had sort of balladeers to a large extent. I think we followed American music, with like Glenn Miller, those big bands and things like that. They were very popular. But remember, we're going back now to when I was 7 or 8 years old. I mean, I'm not too sure what people were listening to, but on the radio, we have national radio here. And then there was only national radio, and they used to play a lot of like light orchestral music. And that's what you had to listen to. The Musicians Union was very strong, and they used to have a thing called needle time over here. You could only play so much recorded music. So they had lots of orchestras that used to play. And for years, that was a real problem for bands because they didn't play records. It's hard to believe now, but the national networks here didn't play records. They had orchestras playing. And that didn't change till the late 60s. Wow. And they still were restricted on how many records they could play, even then. I don't know what the ruling is now. But, and of course, we have many, many radio stations now. Again, I think we've copied you. We've got the same sort of thing that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you still have pirate radio? There's still the ships off the coast?
They closed them down.
They?
The government was really concerned that they couldn't control these pirate radio. But they were only playing music.
Yeah.
They were incredibly popular, and no one was listening to state radio. But so they closed them down and said that they would give the same sort of service with the national networks, but they never did, because the BBC is full of bureaucracy and career audio people. I don't know what you would call them really. I mean, they're interested in their careers. They're not interested in music. And the BBC is full of people like that. So they're always making rules about what records can be played. And DJs do not have the choice of what records they play. They're told what to play by the producers, and the producers are told by the senior producer, and so on. It's a real shame. There was a spontaneity and an energy about pirate radio that I'm afraid disappeared as they were closed down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I got to listen. I'm glad I got a chance to listen when I was there, but I'm sure Trace did too. But anyway, any last comments? Colin, do you want anything before we sign off and say goodbye? Anything you want to?
Well, I think I've said it before. I'm just really looking forward to getting back on the road again, and so fingers crossed. Starting the end of March.
Do you know what the cities it might be?
Well, they're all on. If you go to thezombies.net,
okay,
that will lead you to the tour. And we actually start off with a sort of a music-themed cruise. There'll be lots of bands. I think the Hollies are doing it with us, the last I heard, and many other bands are doing this cruise in the Caribbean. And then we work our way through Florida. And I think we're actually in the States for 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm really looking forward to that. And if any of your viewers or listeners get a chance to come and see us, do come and see us. We'll be playing lots of hits and lots of obscure tracks and lots of tracks from a brand new album. So something for everyone.
Great.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed having a chat.
Thanks for your time, Colin.
Cheers, guys. All the very best.
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Bye.